podcast set, but also have it as like workspace or parking space. So I just was like, I'll make something that goes up into the ceiling.
It works. I like the counterweight too.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, what would look cool and would be pretty easy? So I wanted to do like a thin one so it would be longer. But this was the first time I'd ever worked with concrete. And I like made it was like an inch thick. And I like opened it and it just fell apart immediately. And I was like, oh, Jesus. That's not going to work.
Did you pour it yourself?
Yeah. Because we had a bunch of concrete here from some job that my dad was doing. And I was like, I'll just mess around with it, try and figure it out. But
that's funny.
Yeah, Brendan loves concrete now. He like wants to build like a waterfall out of it and stuff with like the wood pressed into it.
Oh yeah,
it's such a cool look.
Yeah,
but yeah, so this was just boredom, I suppose.
It's all right.
Yeah,
we all need something to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I worked with a little bit of concrete at my old house, and because I'd built a back patio cover.
Yeah.
And I never ended up roofing. But a friend of mine, he works for Bernalillo County Fire, and he does concrete on the side. So, they pour like big slabs. And, he does some cool stuff with concrete.
Yeah.
I'm not that good. I'm like this.
Yeah.
We built a couple little boxes and put the legs of the pergola, in the concrete.
Right.
And then made a box around it and poured it in there. Because then we were going to stucco the bottom portion of the legs to match the house. And so that was my first experience with concrete.
Yeah. It's such a cool, I guess medium, I guess you might call it, but it's like, I've done a lot of research into like, I love architecture and I love buildings and all that sort of stuff. And I watched this channel called the B1M on YouTube, and they like talk about these things that are being built. And they talked about like wood skyscrapers and how they're doing that now, because in the process of making lumber, the tree actually consumes like CO2. And then it gets solidified in the lumber. So it's actually really green to use lumber because it's pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere and then it's locked in the lumber. Yeah. Whereas concrete is the opposite. It releases CO2 when you create concrete through the process. So it's like they're looking at these different green ways of building and then like the limitations of wood, like how high you could actually build a wood skyscraper. But like that stuff was, I got so interested. I like deep dove on that YouTube page for like a couple of weeks. I like watched everything, but
that's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, like this building stuff and designing stuff is like my side hobby, I suppose.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like to build too.
Yeah. I wanted to go to school for engineering, but decided it wasn't really, it was too demanding, I guess, for like what I wanted to be doing on the side.
Yeah.
There was just not enough time for me to do everything that I wanted to do while doing engineering.
Yeah.
But I almost regret that and I was the only person that I knew in the engineering classes, which is a lot of other people when you first go to college. But I was also part of a soccer team. So I was confused. I was like, well, I've got all these friends on the soccer team. And then when I go to engineering class, I like have no friends. All my friends are in like marketing and business. So I was like, I'll just switch to marketing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was never,
just pull that in a little bit.
I was never a school person. So
yeah,
it took me a while.
Did you go to college?
No.
How did you get into being a police officer?
Well, so at the time, I guess we're going to start the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll start now. It's just a conversation.
No, it's good. Yeah. So it's kind of a weird, well, not weird. I never had aspirations of being a police officer when I was a kid.
No.
No. You know, I was a soccer player, and I grew up playing soccer. I started when I was 5 here in town, and never knew any police officers. You know, I just didn't have much interest in that
Right.
line of work. Never thought about it really. You know,
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a professional soccer player. That was
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to do.
Right.
But I was small growing up. That was my biggest deficiency, was my size.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then I grew up doing other things too. I mean, I was very active as a child. So riding bikes, I BMX raced. You know, my first job was at a bicycle shop, wrenching on bikes and
Yeah.
selling bikes and stuff. And I really enjoyed that. And after high school, I went to TVI, which is now CNM, for a couple years for graphic design. I wanted to be a graphic designer. I got really into art in high school and drawing and those sort of things. A buddy of mine in high school actually went on to work as an animator for Pixar.
Oh, wow.
Was one of my good friends in art class. You know, we became pretty close. But I wasn't the greatest artist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I was good with computers, so I could learn those different things fairly quick, and I had an eye for design. So
Right.
I went to TVI for graphic design and ended up only going for a couple of years. I wasn't much of a school person. I didn't have the drive for it.
Yeah.
You know, I barely passed high school. And,
No, I feel that.
you know, and it wasn't that I was lazy. I don't know. It
Just wasn't interesting to you.
Yeah, it just wasn't interesting to me.
Yeah.
You know.
Pull that in just a little bit more.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
You can pull it more so you can sit back.
And
Yeah, there you go.
so it just didn't catch my interest. I'd rather be outside
Yeah.
doing things rather than, you know, sitting in a school classroom. And but I was I understood the material. I just didn't apply myself. So lazy, I guess, in some ways, but not in other ways. And so I ended up only doing about 2 years at TVI. I had moved out of the house out of my parents' house when I was about 18. Lived with some friends here and there, but paid my way, you know, worked at the bicycle shop, like I said, from the time I was about 15, and actually up until the time that I joined the police department, I still worked there. And then I had worked, I'd had a paid internship at a local print shop. So they do like offset printing and stuff. And it was just a small family owned shop. I knew the owner's daughter. She was much older than me, and she lived a couple houses down from my parents, but we ended up riding bikes together, and doing some triathlons and stuff together. And so, she got me in touch with her brother who ran the print shop, and, he gave me a job as one of the graphic designers there in the print shop.
Oh, nice.
And so, I did that. And it was just part-time. And then I also had worked at Discount Tire. So I was working 3 jobs and
Oh man.
going to school, and then ended up quitting college and just working pretty much. You know, and I worked for my own hobbies. So, you know, I bought myself a bike and, you know, paid my way to do triathlons and that sort of stuff, you know, right after high school, you know, growing up BMX racing, and then I got into mountain biking, and then in high school, I'd swam a little bit, played soccer and ran cross country also in high school. So the running aspect, I was pretty good at it.
Right.
And the biking aspect I was really good at. Swimming was probably my weakest of the three in the triathlon. But I was a decent swimmer. I just wasn't fast like some of those guys were. So I had to make it up on the bike and the bike and the run for races.
Right.
But that's what I did. I wanted to race and do those sort of things. And then after high school, obviously I didn't play college soccer or anything like that. But I played men's league. So I played Premier for a while. And got pretty far in men's league. We'd won our local season and went to a tournament out. I forget where it was. Phoenix, maybe? Phoenix or Dallas, I can't remember. We went to a couple. But I think it was Phoenix. And they had some scouts out there. And one of the scouts out there had come up to me after the game. We'd won that tournament, and he had given me an opportunity to come out to the Dallas Burn and do a walk-on tryout for the Dallas Burn, which I never took.
Oh, really?
one of my all-time life regrets.
Why not?
I was dating a girl at the time, and I didn't want to leave. And obviously that didn't work out.
Yeah.
So, but it was just kind of funny how those things play out, in your life, looking back on it.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but it gave me the opportunity to do that stuff. And, when 9/11 happened, I was still working my 3 jobs and, playing soccer as much as I could and running. I did every running race that there was around in triathlon and stuff. And I felt after 9/11 that I needed to do something more. I was not quite 21 at the time. September of 2001, I was 20. I turned 21 that October right after. And my best friend growing up had always wanted to be a police officer his whole life. And so I talked to my parents and my friend, and I'd considered going into the military at that time, but with no college or, I wasn't into that lifestyle or anything. Right. I didn't want to just go overseas and, possibly get killed for, so, and not that there's not a place for guys that enlist real young, but I felt that I was destined for something bigger than that.
Yeah.
And so I decided to, after weighing the options, I decided to do my service here at home. And with my best friend, wanting to be a cop, we decided to put in and test together. And so we did. We put in our applications in 2002. Sometime in the beginning of the year. Went through the process. I ended up making it, and my best friend didn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, which, ended up working out for him. He moved to Denver, just outside Denver. He lives in Castle Rock now, and he's a Douglas County sheriff up in Castle Rock. So he ended up being a police officer as well, or a sheriff's deputy, but he was kind of devastated when that happened.
I'm sure.
And then, it took a while for the background to come through. And I got my acceptance letter, I don't know, October-ish of 2002. But the next academy didn't start until February of 2003. And so I started the police academy in February of '03, into February of '03. But 9/11 was kind of the changing point for me as how or why I decided to join the department. I wanted to do something bigger and serve, my country or my community, in a way that I felt was, that would benefit everybody. I didn't want to just go overseas and ended up dying, in a couple of years without any college or anything. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I joined the department.
And so like when you decided that you were going to join, did you feel that it was going to be something that you've been doing it for what, 20 years now?
18 years now.
18 years now. Did you feel then that you were going to be doing it for that long, or?
I don't know. I didn't really think about
long term.
Yeah. How long I was going to do it for or not, you know. Coming into the police department, they have a really good retirement. So at that time, it was a minimum 20-year retirement pension. So not like a 401k or anything. I do 20 years and I can retire at 70% of my consecutive top 36 months of pay, 70% of that for the rest of my life. And then, if my spouse outlives me, they continue to get that benefit until they pass away. So, retirement purposes, for a 22-year-old kid was, I was trying to set myself up for retirement.
Right.
But I didn't really think about the ending of that. Now I'm at the end and I'm like, I don't know what to do now when I grow up.
Right. I mean, that's the nice thing now is like, you got started so young that you can retire and you're still so young.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I have the option. Right now I'm in a position where I have the option to, if I play my cards right, I could retire in a couple months. So, 4 to 6 months left. We have what's called airtime. You can buy a year towards your retirement. And then I saved all my sick and vacation throughout my career. One of the older guys, one of my training officers, when I was a brand new rookie, had told me to save as much sick and vacation as I could. And, and at the end of your career, you can either get paid out with that money or terminal out or early retirement. So basically you use that retirement at the very end of your career, and you use all that time. So you're on the books still getting paid for however much time you have left.
Right.
And then at the end of that, you're done. You officially retire. So
are you feeling like you are ready?
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it, obviously I can't relate to being a police officer and the intricacies and the overall, especially now with sentiment towards police officers and stuff like that, definitely changing in the recent year. It just seems like such a tough job.
It was always a tough job. But 18 years ago when I first came on, obviously times were different. But there's been, radical changes throughout history, towards police. Look at the riots in LA after Rodney King. We had riots here in the 80s. Also, and it's kind of a for lack of better terms, like a circle of life. we're in New Mexico, in the Wild West. So things back, when policing first started, here it was a lot different, and things change, and police evolve, and communities evolve, and people evolve, and the way that we change as a culture, I think the police have to change also. And, just some of the changes over the course of my career, have been for the better, and not all of them, but I think for the majority of them, the things that we do now as a police department, and departments across the country, are better off for it. Community engagement, community policing, de-escalation, crisis intervention techniques, those sort of things have come a long way to help with not only dealing with people with mental illnesses, but also just people in crisis. They might not have a mental illness, but they have a crisis, or violent subjects, things like that. So I think some of those things and the way that we've changed and how we deal with those things are overall good. I think a lot of the things that have changed, or not a lot, but some of the things that they change or are implementing now also tie our hands from doing our job.
What are some examples of that?
Just the scrutiny that the police fall under for like use of force. The interactions that police have with the citizens daily, very rarely result in a use of force. But if it is resulted in a use of force, it's scrutinized highly. Which is not necessarily a bad thing. But police need to be able to use force to do their job and go home to their family safely. And the way that the culture is, I can't speak for other departments, but just in my department right now, a lot of officers that are out on the streets are afraid to use force. And that scares me because they're afraid of getting in trouble. They're afraid of discipline, and not even for the use of force itself, but maybe for some other small policy violation that might come up during that, and in any given circumstance, in any given day, somebody's going to be out of policy, if you will. They're human beings. They're flawed. They're not robots. They're not androids. They're not going to do everything perfectly all the time. There is a human element to what we do, and I think people forget that sometimes. And so those officers that are afraid to use force or don't use the appropriate level of force, that puts themselves in harm's way, in danger, or the citizens that they're trying to protect. Because, this town is violent, and there's violent criminals out there who want to kill people and police, and we need to be able to confront that, but the majority of the times, at least the officers that I've worked around, and myself included, I have respect for the community, and I treat people with respect. And the good majority of people out here in our community are just people trying to live their lives. They're not bad people. They're not trying to do criminal acts. They're just doing their stuff. I might pull somebody over for a traffic violation, and maybe they're having a bad day, and they start yelling at me or whatever on a traffic stop, and that's not necessarily their character. It's just because maybe them getting pulled over just kind of
was the last
straw for them on that given day, and that happens, now that's not always the case. There's people that are just rude and
and I'm sure it's difficult to read that.
It is sometimes, but for the most part, you can kind of tell, they're just frustrated, and it's nerve-wracking when you get pulled over. And so, I think having some compassion and some grace going up to those, but while still maintaining officer safety is critical, and you got to remember, at least I was taught, when I was a rookie that, they're just good people. You know, I still want to make sure that I'm safe and protect myself, you know, because who knows what they are, you know. They could have just killed somebody. I don't know, you know. But I think for the most part and the most interactions that police have with our citizens are good interactions, you know. And that's not to say that there's not bad police officers, you know. There's bad police officers or bad apples in every profession.
Yep.
You know, it just happens. But I think those people end up weeding themselves out. So
yeah. What departments have you served in? Because obviously there's multiple different areas of the police force. And
within the police department,
Yeah.
what sections? So I did the majority of my time was in the field, what we call field services, just taking calls for service. You know, I was in uniform in a marked police car, responding to citizens' calls for police. That also includes traffic enforcement, you know, DWI, you know, that sort of stuff. So, you know, all the aspects that go along with that. I also had the opportunity to be on our bicycle unit. So I was a bike unit for several years in the Southeast Area Command. And that was probably some of the most fun I had on this department.
Really?
Yeah.
So where is that? Where did you, where in Albuquerque would you be on a bike?
So for me, it was the Southeast Area Command, which is now labeled as the International District, or prior to that, the War Zone.
Oh, yeah.
So along the Central Corridor, we mainly patrolled the Central Corridor from like San Mateo down to the freeway. So the Southeast Area Command is everything east of I-25 up to Eubank and everything south of I-40 to the base, basically.
Oh, okay.
So it's a pretty big area command. You know, we would ride east of San Mateo and west, but the majority of our time was west, down in the Nob Hill area, where a lot of the foot traffic and stuff was.
So you're on bicycles, not motorcycles, right?
Yep,
Okay.
bicycles.
And why was that so much fun for you?
Well, just my history growing up, you know, working and wrenching on bikes and racing bikes, and, you know, so
Just felt natural.
doing my job on a bike was just like, this is the ultimate job.
Did you feel like, because whenever I see a police officer on a bike, I feel like if I were that police officer, I'd feel kind of naked.
Yes and no. Like, you don't have the comfort of your car there, but you're also more engaged with the community when you're on bikes. I mean, that is the true definition of community policing, I think, is our officers on bikes.
Yeah.
You know, because you're out there, you're approachable, you're responding to calls. I mean, we responded to calls for service on our bikes. You know, we dealt with quality of life issues. So, you know, the homeless people and the drugs and prostitution and, you know, all that sort of stuff. You know, we had a lot of advantages on bikes that in a car you just don't have. You know, we're a lot more quiet. We can get places still really quick. You know, we could conduct surveillance and do, you know, lots of different things on them, which was a lot of fun. And then the community engagement, you know, we got to know all the patrons that were in the Nob Hill area, and, you know, they saw our faces, and, you know, we talked to them and said hi and helped them with concerns or problems that they might have. And then we got to know the homeless population too, and knew which ones were, that we were able to help and which ones didn't want our help at all.
Right.
You know, so, but it was a good time. You know, me and my partner had a lot of fun doing that. So,
I mean, it definitely sounds like a good time, just riding a bike around for work and just going places, especially with the past like you had.
It was so much fun. And we still had our cars too. So, you know, we had to do that. But, you know, if it was too cold to ride or snowy or something, but we rode in the winter and in the summer. I mean, we're fortunate enough here to have, you know, to be able to almost ride year round. So,
yeah, pretty much.
But it was a lot of fun. After that, I had went into narcotics. So I was a narcotics detective for almost a year. And then the end of my career here, the last about 4 years, I spent some time in the Crimes Against Children unit, and then our child exploitation detail. And now currently I'm assigned to our internal affairs division, our use of force section. So our force section, now I investigate use of force.
So you're actually a part of that. When did you become a part of that investigative unit?
Which one? The use of force?
Yeah, use of
or
force.
internal affairs. About November, end of October, November, I came over.
So has there been like a big push towards that sector? I mean, with everything that it seems just by public sentiment that everybody is really focused, like we were talking about earlier, on how cops use their force. And were you put into that, or did you put yourself into that situation because of what had been going on last year, or just happenstance, happen chance, whatever?
Well, for me, I'd had some. It was time for me to get out of the juvenile section and investigating those crimes.
Yeah.
And so I needed a place where I could decompress a little bit and but still utilize the skills that I had, obtained over my career and as an investigator. And they needed help there in that unit. And so they asked if I'd be willing to go there, and I said, sure. So I was kind of put there, but kind of put there asked to be put there, if you will. So it hadn't really nothing to do with, the DOJ or the Department of Justice coming in and whatnot. But that section was created based on the dissent decree from the Department of Justice. They split the internal affairs unit into, policy and then force.
So that just happened recently?
Yeah, within the last 7 years.
Oh, okay. So a while ago.
Yeah.
Still. But yeah, I was about to say, I can imagine that the child section of your line of work would be pretty brutal.
It is. It was rough. I liked what I did. It's good work. I'm helping true victims, children. Right. But it definitely takes its toll on you,
Yeah.
For me, at least, it took its toll, from the betterment of my mental health, and had some issues with that. So I needed to get out of those investigations,
right.
But the work itself is needed. It's like a necessary evil.
Yeah.
The things that people do to their kids is just horrendous. So
I'm sure it's especially difficult when you have young children.
It is. Yeah. They definitely take, or feel the effects of that. And I try to separate it as much as I can, but it's hard sometimes seeing all those things and not trying to protect my kids and shelter them as much as I can, but my kids are good kids. So, I think that they understand, and, although they didn't have social media, and I was very strict on those sort of things,
right.
And still am, I think they understand why. So,
yeah, I can, it's probably a difficult area to like talk with the kids about like what your work is, like, especially when you're in that area, and like having them understand where you're coming from, and like having seen things that you can't share with them. But having them be able to understand that like this is because it's stuff that actually happens. I've taken a like a role with my brothers, where like I feel very like protective over like the stuff that they do. But I also want to make sure that they're like learning in ways that they can. And I like, that's just from like being a person, not from actually like seeing some really messed
Right.
up stuff. So I
Yeah.
can't like, when I heard that that's what you served in, I was like, man, I can't even imagine how difficult that must be.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to explain to them exactly why sometimes, right? You know, like there are bad people out there that want to harm kids, you know, and not just parents that get frustrated and lose their temper and, you know, maybe spank their kid too hard or with a belt or whatever. I mean, you know, outside of that, there's some truly evil people out there that want to take advantage of kids, you know, sexual predators and online predators that do that stuff. And that was, you know, directly in the line of work that I did, you know, also part of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And so it was a interesting take, it was a delicate balance to balance work and home. You know, like, you know, the girls would, you know, cause I have three daughters. And so, you know, they'd be like, well, all my friends have this social media or this and that. And,
Right.
and I'm like, I don't care what your friends have or don't have. Like, I'm sorry, you know,
Absolutely.
like if you're going to have this, you know, there's going to be limitations on it. And, you know, and spot checks,
Yeah.
like, all right, let me see your phone, you know, and I go through their phone and spot check them just to make sure that they're not talking to some random person that they don't know, you know, a friend of a friend who the friend doesn't really even know, you know, with the culture today and social media as it is, you know, everybody caring about how many people follow them and how many likes they get, you know, on certain things. It's, you know, I truly think social media is the downfall of our society. It's just horrible, you know, and always having your face in in some sort of a social media platform, you know, kids don't get a break from it, you know, and I wanted my kids to have that break, you know, and not because I was worried about them being bullied at school or whatever, but, you know, when I grew up, you know, if I got bullied at school, like I could come home and that was the end of it. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't feel it at home. You know, these kids now, they feel that at home because of social media and, you know, they still get bullied online and, you know, they have no reprieve from it. And so the mental, you know, toll that it takes on our kids, you know, is horrible. And it, you know, ultimately can lead to suicide for them, which is a bad thing. And I didn't want my kids to have to suffer in that way. And then also to protect them from online predators and to make sure that they're staying safe. And so we talked to them a little bit about that. And, you know, although they might not have understood it at that time, I think they kind of realize it now, you know, at least my older two, you know, my youngest being 8, almost 9, you know, she wants to play games with her friends online and, you know, and there's only a certain number of friends that I let her play with online, you know, like your little brother is one of them, you know, and it's like, I need to know who they are. Right. You know, you can't just be, you know, like that game Among Us or whatever that's really big right now. Like she doesn't play that game. Yeah. You know, I don't want her in some game where it's, you know, a bunch of chatting and whatever else with people that she doesn't know. Yeah. Just for a little bit of entertainment. There's other things that she can do. So
yeah, did you watch The Social Dilemma?
No.
Well, I mean, it's such a weird area that we're in right now because it is so like screen based. Like when I grew up, I didn't like, I would watch. So I actually got forced to like watch TV because I wanted to get up and go play, but it was 5 a.m. And my mom was like, you can't go wake up the neighbors right now. It's way too early.
Right.
So they would have like SpongeBob on for the first like until like 7:30. And then my mom was like, all right, our neighbors know us. You can go over there, wake up their kids and like play. And that's like what I did. I was always like, my dad built me a bike jump in our cul-de-sac in Denver. And I was out there every day on my bike, on roller skates, on a skateboard, like always doing that stuff. When it snowed, we would build snow jumps into like the holding pond that we had next to us. And like, that's all we would do was play outside always. Yeah. And, like, and I guess I was kind of the driving force in that neighborhood, because when I left when I was 7, they were like, we don't even play outside anymore. Like no one does anything because Devin's not here to wake us up and go play.
Yeah.
So, that was like who I was. And like watching my brothers like get sucked into these video games and stuff, because I've never liked video games. Like it just doesn't feel real to me. I'm also terrible at them, so that probably plays into it. But it's hard for me because like I like get frustrated with Lachlan because he's always on his iPad, but then I'm like, there's not really much else for him to do right now, because like me and my mom are working, Brendan's in school, like doing homework or whatever, like and it's there, you know, like I can't blame him for getting onto that when like we got it for him to use it. But yeah, since then, like I talked to Lachlan. I'm like, I want you to build things. Like really, I just like mess with stuff. Like, and he's always doing stuff now. Like he takes all of the wires that he can find and like pretends to build these like computers that like control the world or something, which like, it's great because he's like actually like using his imagination rather than just like numbing himself.
Yeah.
Which is like my biggest like worry, is like them sucking into like these shows and video games and then having like zero creativity.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, we need to foster that in our, you know, for you, your youngest brother, and for me, my kids, you know, like Lachlan was over at my house and we were talking about earlier, like, you know, my garage was messy and I had just cleaned it, and I'd put some roof rack stuff up so I could put, you know, the storage up there and cleaned it out so my wife could park her car in the garage. And one day I come home from work and Lachlan and Emmeline are in there. Well, they were in the house at that time, but I'd come back and all of a sudden, like, there's all this wood out all over my garage with, like, it looked like, you know, Tinkerbell threw up in my garage with all of the
stuff that was everywhere,
with all the glitter everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
Of course I have a girl, and she loves sparkly things, but she's very much a tomboy. Yeah. Also, right. You know, and I build things, you know, for the house. Like I built our entertainment center, and I built my daughter's bed, and you know, that sort of stuff. And so I had all this extra wood out, and so her and Lachlan found some old, you know, not even old wood, but wood, and they built these big contraptions in my garage, and you know, all over the place. And I'm like, I couldn't even get mad at them because you know, it's much better that they do that than they're just on the couch watching TV or something, you know? And so I was like, well, good for you. Like, at least they're using their imagination, and, you know, and it's still in my garage right now. I haven't even taken it down yet.
Yeah. I mean, we get into that because like Lachlan's like, I want to build something. And then I'm like, when he says that, it like makes my brain stir. I'm like, what can I build? You know? And then I like, just like the other day, me and Brendan built a rocket stove just randomly. And like, I've never welded before really, but my dad had this old, or this welder in the garage, and it's a stick welder, and it's so difficult to like use, but I was like, you know what? I'll just mess around with it, see if I can figure it out. And we built a rocket stove out of like this big piping, and it's super cool. It was so much fun to make. Yeah. And then Lachlan, of course, every time there's like a box, like a cardboard box or something.
Oh my goodness.
He's like, can we keep that? Like we had to build all the heaters at the restaurant, and every box there was like all these like big dense cardboard pieces. And he was like building like little guns out of them and like all this different stuff. And he's like, Devin, you got to take this box home. I put all my stuff in it. And so I'll bring it here. And I've got, oh no, I threw it away actually because it was just sitting here and he didn't want to use it anymore. But I brought like 2 big boxes of cardboard home for him to make stuff out of.
Yep.
And then it ends up sitting there, but he'll find something else and throw it around the house. And then you have to pick all that up.
Well, they're 8, and it's like the little tornadoes, little Tasmanian devils. They go and, find something shiny and they play with it for a minute and then they leave it there and they go on to something else.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure it's the same at your house. It is at mine. They just leave their stuff everywhere. But yeah, cardboard's big at my house too with my kids. And, this weekend, when Lachlan was over this weekend, they were using they found cardboard boxes in my garage that I hadn't taken the recycle bin yet. And they repurposed them for other things. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah. But it's good. It's good to see that in, the inventiveness of them, what they can come up with, their imagination and want to invent. And, and I think too many kids are silenced in that nowadays. Like, oh, don't do that,
right.
Just, kind of be seen and not heard type of thing. And, and I have to be careful with myself sometimes too, cause I'll come home and I'm stressed or frustrated or whatever. And, like the other day I came home and one of the other little soccer kids was at the house, Lucy, and she was at the house with Emmy and they were playing and being loud. And I yelled at them. I'm like, hey, Emmeline. She's like, what? I was like, stop that. And she goes, stop what? I'm like, playing. Like that was the first thing that came to my head, like being loud, you know? And and after I said it, like right afterwards, I was like, oh my God, did I really just say that? And my wife is on the couch and she looks at me, she goes, really? And I was like, yeah, sorry. Like, it happens and, but they're just being kids and being loud and that's what they do, and I forget sometimes that that's how they are because of my own stress or whatever, and so parenting is hard for sure. And, especially being a police officer and doing what I do and seeing what I see is even more difficult sometimes on my kids, but we try to get them as much exposure to different things as I can. And, and, luckily for me, my kids are wonderful. Yeah. They have good attitudes and they're sweet, respective, caring, they care about other people. And that's, that's great. So I really, I'm blessed that my kids turned out so well.
Yeah, definitely. It seems hard, harder and harder to like raise good kids. Like you see a lot of kids. I mean, there are so many good kids, but I guess it's the same as anything. Like the loudest ones, like the minority are usually the loudest, or the most annoying. Yeah, I guess. But there are so many kids out there that you're just like, you obviously just struggled growing up. Like it's hard to even blame them because that there was something that like triggered them into being the way that they are. Right. When they're like not respecting adults and just not good kids. Yeah. You're like, like I can't even be that mad at you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's so nice now, before, my first house that we bought was way out on the South Valley. And, my oldest, she's 19 and, it was hard for her growing up. I think like she had some friends that came over that, they were always at our house. They were kind of like an extension of my kids. Mm-hmm. And I liked that, like having the kids around the house, but it was very few and far between. And the 2 younger ones didn't have a lot of that, and now that we've moved up into the Heights and where we live now, like there's kids at our house all the time, and I love it, to be able to have those kids at the house, and it reminds me of me growing up and having my friends over, and you know, and so I like that, you know, like when Lachlan comes over, like this weekend, it was wonderful having him at the house, and just, you know, I consider him one of my kids.
Yeah, it's always fun when Emmeline and him are together.
Yeah, you know, and they're like brother and sister. They fight like brother and sister, but you know, but they're really good together too. And so it's, you know, it's funny. And you know, Addison's best friend is always at the house, and so I'm, you know, she's just another one of my kids too, and I treat her like one of my kids. And you know, Michaela's older now, but there's still some of her girlfriends that come over, and you know, they're doing things that they shouldn't. And I'm like, really? You know, and I have to parent them, and they're like, sorry.
I mean, I've always liked that idea. And that's why I love our house. I wish it had better internet, because then people would want to be here more. But like, I like the idea of having the kids here, like at where, you know, where they are, rather than out doing stuff at other people's houses. So if like you can have an environment where everybody wants to hang out, you're like, this is great, because now I don't have to worry about them.
Exactly.
And their parents know that they're here, and it just makes things simple.
Yeah, it does. It's, you know, it's good. You know, and then my kids have surrounded themselves with good friends too, which definitely plays a part in that. You know, they're not out getting in trouble, sneaking out of the house, you know, doing drugs, you know, that sort of stuff. Like some of the kids that I see out there, and, you know, their kids are good kids, you know, their friends are good kids, and their families are good. You know, we know all of their families, and, you know, we're on a, you know, first name basis with all of them, and we all get together and hang out, and that's what I like, you know.
The sports environment is really important, I feel like, for conducting good friendships.
Absolutely. You know, these kids need those activities and those sports. And it does. It fosters good friendships and lifelong friendships, you know. I'm sure you still have friends that you grew up playing soccer with, and, you know, and now, like, I'm 40 years old, and I still have friends from when I was, you know, Lachlan and Emmeline's age, you know, that I played soccer with growing up, and we're still in touch, you know, and not as often as we probably should be sometimes, but, you know, we see each other now and then, and, or, you know, text back and forth. I don't have any social media, so I don't, you know, do Facebook and that stuff, but, you know, now they have kids, and, you know, it's funny, especially when I see their kids out playing soccer with my kids, and I'm like, hey,
that's always nice, I bet.
You know, so that's kind of interesting, and you know, but you know, it's a good environment for these kids to make lifelong friends and have good social skills. And this pandemic that we've been in this last year has been really hard on kids, you know, because everything is so screen based now, with school being online and everything else, and the kids not being able to go outside. And, you know, when some parents are afraid of this virus, and I understand that, but, you know, my kids' mental health and the betterment of them is way more important than me getting this virus. And that's why we've tried to keep them engaged as much as we can with other parents and kids that, you know, for the most part, like, we knew that, you know, they were good people and not out trying to, you know, you could catch the virus from anywhere, but, you know, we were always kind of together. So we had this core kind of group of, you know, the soccer community that kept these kids, or our kids, sane. During this last year, which has been really nice, you know.
Yeah. I mean, Brendan is 16, so he didn't really have an outlet, like, well, and his teams weren't doing anything really. So he didn't have an outlet like Lachlan did. Where we were fortunate that the Vellas were still running stuff, to get the kids out there, and like going out there and watching them, and then seeing the way people acted, like, that weren't a part of it. I was like, man, it's gotta be sad to be like that. You know, like, there were so many people that were like turning in disgust when they drove by, and like, I'm like, you're really upset about kids playing?
Yeah.
Like, where are we in the world right now? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense.
No. And I wasn't worried about my kids. I mean, I guess anything could happen. One of them could have caught the virus and had suffered severely from it. Sure. That's a possibility, but the statistics for it were very low.
Right. I mean, you're probably more likely to get into a car accident on the way there.
Yeah,
Than
exactly.
them getting hurt out playing with friends,
Yep. And this whole time, and they did it as safely as they could. And look, a year later, none of the kids have gotten sick. Yeah. They're all fine, and I think that it's helped them kind of escape some of that, confinement, just from being in the house.
Oh, it was awful. It's like, especially when Lachlan started going on, when we first got on and he was all online, he was so depressed.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I didn't even know kids like got depressed.
Yeah.
Like that. He was so sad. He was like, I just want to see my friends.
Right. Well,
and I was like, I don't know what to tell you, dude. I think you should see your friends too. I don't think there's any reason you should not be seeing your friends right now.
Yep. It was horrible, and Emmy started a new school this year, and, she didn't know any of these kids coming into school, in third grade. And she is so outgoing and so sweet that she never had a problem making friends or interacting with kids. Like, that just wasn't her, because she's the center of attention.
Yeah.
And, her being online for the first month, and, and she comes up to her mom and I, and she goes, how do I make friends online? Like,
right. It's impossible.
How do I make friends?
Yeah, it's possible.
And that broke my heart. I'm like, baby, I don't know. Like, a lot of these kids, have been going to school for several years with each other, so they know each other. Mm-hmm. I said, you're the new kid and it's online. Like, it's very hard for them to get to know you in the amount of time that you have to interact with them online. It's not like you're going out to recess and they get to see you and you get to, interact with them and they get to know your personality. I said, you don't have that right now. I said, just take some time and, it'll get better. And it did eventually, but yeah, it was very hard at the beginning for them. And, and we're thankful that Lachlan was around, and, and a couple of her other little friends that were able to come over, and, or vice versa. She was able to go to their house, and, cause at least they had that outlet, especially at the very beginning,
right.
Where it was, everything was kind of shut down and locked down for a while. And, but yeah, it was tough for a little while. So.
Was there a lot of that, like, change in the way things were done in the police force when the lockdown happened? Or like, was there, I mean, obviously you guys have mask mandates and all that sort of stuff, but like, was there a change in the actions that you guys did? Like, did you have to go through more training?
So the field guys, I think the guys that were out taking calls for service kind of had it worse, because they're out there interacting with the public. In the positions that I was in, I was fortunate enough to be able to, I wasn't out directly with the public every single day. A lot of my time is office time. Mm-hmm. So I was just in the office. Where I'm at now, a lot of our guys were fortunate enough to be able to work from home, because we can do our investigations anywhere, really. As long as we have a computer and internet, we were good to go. And so that definitely helped some. And, within the last month, we've been back in the office now. And so, but, I've been vaccinated, and some of the other guys have been vaccinated too. And so that helps some with some of that mandating to be at work, instead of at home. But then it puts more stress on those parents that are still at home with their kids, because their kids haven't gone back to school yet. So like right now, it's upon my wife to be at home with the kids while I'm mandated to be at work in the office. Right. And so that's a little hard. I wish they'd still give us the option to be able to work from home or in the office.
Right.
that way I can help a little more at home. But
especially because the kids are still at home for most of them.
exactly.
You know.
So, but I don't make those decisions. So,
right.
Yeah.
Is like, were there a lot of guys that were worried? I mean, I don't know how much you interact with the frontline guys, like the guys that are on call, I guess, for the public, but was there anxiety around that? And like,
I don't know. At the beginning, when we kind of first went into quarantine and up through the summer, I didn't have a lot of interaction with the frontline guys at all. And then I was off for about 3 months during the summer because of some of my mental health stuff, and so I didn't really interact with them a lot.
right.
And then when I came back in November into where I'm at now, I've had a little more contact with the frontline guys because I'm investigating their uses of force.
Right.
But they don't seem worried, anymore. I think it's kind of past that. So at the beginning, I don't know what it was like for them being on the front. I can tell you those in my office weren't really worried about it. We were still doing our stuff, and then, at that time too, I was working some on the federal side. I was, when I was in the child exploitation detail, I'd actually gotten a position with the FBI task force for that. So I was going through the background process for the FBI task force spot for their child exploitation and human trafficking task force. And before I had to leave and get out of that unit. So I didn't have a lot of interaction with the frontline guys or the main public, and we did some, but we made sure we were safe. We masked up and did what we needed to do, when we did go out for warrants or stuff like that.
So with your current role, how often are you having to look into cases of use of force, and what does that kind of entail? Like,
so I get my cases from on call, really. I'm on call about once a month, or once 1 week. And then I have about 3 or 4 weeks off, and then I go back on call for a week. And during those times, I go out and if there's a use of force during that week, there's 3 of us that are on call, how it works right now. And we kind of rotate between the 3 detectives for that week. So once one person gets one, it goes to the next one, and then back to the first one. And they come in, and the majority of the uses of force, all the uses of force that I've had to go out for and investigate have been pretty minor, and all within policy justified. But then, of course, we got to do our investigation and write them all up and do that stuff. So, but yeah, it just depends, because we have different levels of force. We classify them into levels. So there's very minor to moderate to very serious, and the most serious, of course, are like the officer involved shootings. And we do investigate those as well. So, in the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple officer involved shootings. So those still happen, although they're still fairly rare. Mm-hmm. There's still times where that does happen, and then the moderate ones, like bean bags, or less lethal munitions. So bean bag, 40 mils, the tasers, those sort of stuff. We investigate all those too. So
when you were part of the front line, did you have interactions that went to like the less moderate uses of force? They went higher. Like, were you ever involved in like an officer shooting or?
Yeah. I was. So it was actually October 8th of 2007. I was involved in an officer involved shooting, where I had to shoot and shoot somebody and they end up dying from those injuries. And that was the only time that I actually shot. But yeah, over my career, I've had times where I've been shot at. I've been close to, there was times after that where I was rarely close to almost being involved in another shooting. But I've been fortunate enough to have only been involved in one in my career. Statistically, the chances of being involved in multiple officer-involved shootings increase after your first one. Yeah. So I was lucky enough to have only been involved in one there. And then, over 18 years, the only other time that I've used like less lethal munitions other than hands-on, I utilized my taser twice in 18 years. Everything else was hands-on or OC spray, or pepper spray, however people want to classify it as. But most of my interactions were, I was a pretty good communicator. And then there for a long time too, I was on our crisis negotiation team as a negotiator. So I had a lot of training in talking people down and stuff. So I was able to talk people into handcuffs more than I had to force them into handcuffs. So I've been pretty fortunate in my career not to have been involved in too many altercations, but, not everybody in their career shoots and kills somebody either.
Right.
So, unfortunately I had to go through that also.
Was it hard for you to recover from that?
Yes and no. I mean, it was difficult. But at the end of the day, it was either I shoot him or he shoots another officer.
Right.
And that's
your job at that moment.
Yeah, that was my job at that moment. So he kind of forced my hand, to have to take that action, because the situation was, he was basically in a standoff with another officer. And he was about to ambush him, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time with a rifle, and I was able to stop him from shooting the officer. So
that seems. I feel like there's a lot of sentiment around officers and the way that, especially, they've been portrayed recently as like. Many of them are, and it's like hard to say it, but a lot of them were like bullied kids when they grew up and stuff like that. Like that's kind of the sentiment towards officers. And that's why they're in positions like this, so they can feel some sort of power, Sure. And obviously that's not all officers, but, I'm sure you've come across officers that that just weren't in the job for the right reasons.
Oh yeah.
And portrayed themselves in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even within our own department, there was officers that were heavy-handed, that took things a little too far, or had a big ego, if you will, or whatever. But those officers ended up weeding themselves out. They did things that got them in trouble, and ended up, getting them fired ultimately from the department. I think some of those still might be on the department, some officers like that. I was fortunate enough in my career to have worked around really good officers, and good people. Of course, I knew some of those officers that ended up getting fired and whatever else, because we are a small department. And so who they are. But, I did my best to try to stay away from those types of people and.
Yeah, I can imagine. I haven't seen it, but I heard there's a documentary called The 7-5. Have you heard that? Have you seen that? So from what I've gathered, and I haven't seen it, it's about corruption in a police force. And the guy, Michael something, I think I have his name up actually. Michael Dowd. He was, it was like his first day on the job, and like his introduction into being a cop was like a group of cops throwing a guy off of a building.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And killing him. And it was like talking about how the culture of this unit 75, was just like the worst type of police culture that you could possibly have.
Sure. Just kind of rogue, like TV stuff almost.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And they got caught. And Michael Dowd went to prison for 10 years and stuff like that. But now he's like talking about his experience and how, like, it's true that the culture breeds the people kind of, and you have to be immensely strong mentally to be able to go into a culture like that and be like, that's not who I'm going to be, and it's hard to expect everyone to do that. So it's good to hear that like
Absolutely.
the Albuquerque Police Department has like a strong culture of doing the right thing and weeding out the right people. Obviously it's never perfect, but
absolutely. I think, in my experience, growing up in this town, working in this town, giving my youth to this department in this community, the police department really is, or at least I was raised as it's a brotherhood, right? Brothers and sisters in blue, the thin blue line between good and evil. And of course there's, even here, there's guys and gals that, have gotten into it for the wrong reasons, of course. But we are fortunate enough here, in my opinion, that we don't have that corruptive culture mentality. There's not an air of, like Chicago or, New York even, or some of the bigger, giant police departments where, they're run by, the mob and those things, are really big. Like, down here we have the cartels and stuff, but I haven't seen, cartels implanting officers within our department and, and things like that. Like that's just doesn't happen here.
Right.
Even, the whole movement with the Black Lives Matter and all the protests with, officer involved shootings and black versus white and all that stuff. Like, I'm sure that there is corruption and racially motivated stuff that goes on around the country in other parts. I just don't see that stuff here. I've been fortunate enough to have worked around good officers, and me myself, like I grew up with kids of all different backgrounds that were good friends. I wasn't raised to be, racially biased, if you will. And we all have our own biases, and our own, and I'm not saying that I haven't felt fear or whatever because of somebody else, but I don't look at, a black guy, as somebody that's a lesser person than me,
right.
Any more than I do a Hispanic guy or an Asian guy or anything, I don't. I didn't grow up in that culture. And so for me, I didn't really experience a lot of that negativity until I came on the department, until we kind of had an influx of people from other, places that had came here for refuge. Like, when Katrina hit, Hurricane Katrina, and a lot of people from Memphis moved up here. I was on the streets at that time, and we had a lot of influx of the Black community that had come in, and some of them were minorities as far as their socioeconomic standing. They didn't have a lot of money, and so they lived in some of the not so good parts of town. And we would go there and, for calls, and And I would hear these, things from these people like, I'm just there because, or I'm doing this because they're black, or I'm doing this because of this. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with why I'm there,
Right.
or even what I'm thinking. Like in their head, in their story, that's true because they've experienced it. And I can't minimize that, and I'm not going to change the way that they feel about police, and because it's ingrained in them, that's what they've experienced. That's all they know. But I don't know that,
Right.
Coming here, I have no, if you do something wrong, I don't care what color you are, like that's it.
Yeah.
I got a job to do, and I'm going to do the job the best way that I know how, and as safe, as I know how, so I can go home to my family, and so here in this department, and that corruption and stuff, and, is there a possibility that it's happened? Sure. I've never been around it. I've never been around officers who have, taken things too far, or been involved in that corruption. But, I've heard stories of officers that did go rogue and have done those things, even within our department, before I came on. So it happens, but I think it's very few and far between. And we're fortunate enough to live in a community where the majority of our police force are good officers that just want to make a difference in their community or their own lives, and do the right thing.
Right.
So, and that's, that's good.
Yeah. I think it's really difficult for people to humanize, like, even just officers. Because like, and it seems as though it's mostly stemmed in the recent times from social media, and obviously terrible cops in certain scenarios. But the ability for everybody to like demonize one group of people because of the actions of a few, like, I don't think it's ever been so able as it is now because of social media. And, I mean, we got to the point where there have been cities that are like defunding the police, which I'm interested to hear what you think of that and how that like hit you when that happened. But when I heard that for the first time, I was like, what kind of box are you guys trying to open? Like, where are we going?
Right. Well, and, talking about that, right? Demonizing a group of people because of a few, right? Isn't that what they say the police do to the black community?
Yeah.
I mean, that's racism at its core, and demonizing the police nationwide because there's a few bad apples is, in my opinion, still racist against police.
Yeah.
If you look at it from those same lenses, it's that same core issue, right? They don't like you because of XYZ,
Right.
They don't like you because you're black, or they don't like police because they're police.
Yeah. And I think it's all from your experience.
It is.
So like, if you feel racism towards, say, a black person, it may be because you had an altercation with a black person in the past that flipped your perspective on that.
Sure.
And not saying that that's right at all, but the ability of social media to ingrain these interactions in everybody when they're not happening to everybody.
Yes.
Makes it so that like the whole country can turn against, well, not the whole country. I'm positive that the whole country did not want to fund the police. But like the loud minority to be able to turn on the police like that, there's no other way that many people, and most of them, I'd have to say, were probably privileged people that like just wanted to fit in. That's just never going to work. And for them to try and think that that's going to work just because of someone else's interaction.
Absolutely. Yeah. Defunding the police, obviously I think that's a bad idea. I don't see where that fits into any, where that benefits anybody. It just doesn't. Who else is going to come to you, in your worst day? And that's what the police do. We are there and we meet people oftentimes, more often than not, on the worst day of their life, for whatever reason, and we are the ones that, as the police, that are running into those situations instead of running away from them. I took an oath to protect the community that I serve, and that's what I intend to do until I retire.
Yeah.
Is do the best that I can with that, and to defund the police just makes it harder for those police or those communities to stay safe, I think, and to effectively do their job.
Yeah.
Does that mean that I'm against police reform or changes in the police? No.
Right.
I don't. I think, like I said earlier, right, over the course of my 18 years here, a lot of the changes that have been made and throughout the way that we do and conduct business in the police department has been good.
Yeah.
We need to evolve just like everything else, and we need to get better at it. And could there be things that are made better? Absolutely. Our big issue here there for a while was mental health, right? And dealing with the mentally ill community, but our mental health system is broken.
That's something I would like to play devil's advocate for just a moment. Obviously, I agree with you on everything that you just said, but there are people that are saying the police shouldn't be doing everything that they're doing. Like maybe they're not the ones to go to domestic, outbursts or whatever, which I don't necessarily agree with because those are often the most violent.
Yes.
Or mentally ill people, you guys have to deal with all that. That's all on you. And some of the ideas was not necessarily defunding the police fully, but creating new areas that focus on different things. Maybe a homeless sector, that they just deal with all the homeless people. But it just gets into a situation where I feel like all of that has been put under the police because of a reason. There are more often than not times in all of those situations where the police's physical expertise and their ability to use force has to come up.
Right.
And we'd rather the police be able to protect themselves than bring someone in that's not going to be able to protect themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, is there a means to send civilians into certain situations? Sure, there are. I agree with that. Domestic violence, I agree with you, is not one of those.
Yeah.
That is some of the most volatile things that we have to get involved with. And statistically, the rates of homicide, under domestic violence are really high.
Yeah.
So sending somebody that doesn't have that training, the knowledge, or the ability to handle that situation, if it does turn violent, is just setting those people up to get hurt.
Yeah.
And, the other outreaches like the homeless, we have not communities, but we have people and folks out there here in our community that go and reach out to the homeless and provide them with food and shelter and resources and stuff. And I agree with that. Can they, be bigger or more funded? Sure. We could absolutely look at some of that stuff, the mentally ill stuff. We have specific things within our department that we've done to address that, sending officers out that have a little more training in those areas of mental health, and
clinicians that are riding with those officers, and our crisis intervention detectives that have clinicians that ride with them to go out and assess those situations and do follow-up. And, but still, it doesn't mean that they're sending a police officer just because they have a gun, but a lot of times people that are mentally ill are violent. And if they're in a place of crisis, we have to have somebody out there that can take an action if needed. Yep. More often than not, it's not needed, right. And those people are, brought to the hospital or whatever, without incident. But until we change the mental health, until the mental health section changes, and that gets better for the community, because it's a broken system. We send them to the hospital, they're out, and we're dealing with them again the next day. And it's just this revolving door. That's not on the police to fix. Yeah. I don't know what the solution is. We went away from mental institutions, and put all these mentally ill people out on the streets, because there were so many problems with the mental institutions. Now, it's good and bad in both situations, I think. There was good things that happened with the mental institutions, but there was also bad things that happened with the mental institutions. Yeah. That's why they got rid of them. But then they created this whole other problem that nobody, is willing to deal with. And it's just upon the police to deal with. Right. And there's other groups out there that tried to take care of the mentally ill community. And a lot of them are homeless and stuff like that, and because of substance abuse or whatever, and they self-medicate. And so it's a fine line to walk as the police department, because, our job is, oftentimes and not a temporary solution to a more permanent problem, like with domestic violence, for example. We go in, we arrest the guy or the girl, because it can be either, because of a domestic violence incident. We take them to jail to protect the victim, and, but then it's upon the victim to take some sort of an action there too, Yeah. And oftentimes than not, they don't want to leave their abuser or that spouse.
Yeah. I've actually had an altercation with that.
And that's hard, and it's, how do you convince, this young lady or this young man to leave the person that's abusing them? I can't do that as a police officer. I can give them the tools, to go down and get a restraining order or whatever, but ultimately they have to make that decision, and sometimes it does go further than that. And that's when stalking becomes a big thing, or, and or killing, because that abuser takes it personally, and they think of them as, well, they're not going to be with me, so they're not going to be with anybody else. And, right. And they make their life hell. And so, it's, our job in that situation is just that temporary solution right then and there, to a more permanent problem for them. And
just to try and intervene and get them to go in the right direction.
Exactly. And, the harder that, these states and these communities make it on the police to enforce the laws and the police to do their job, is just, I think, is going to create more problems, before it gets better.
Did you guys have, because I'm pretty sure it's California, that they said that there's no chokeholds in their police department. Did you guys do that?
Yes. Yeah. We don't do chokeholds unless it's like a, life or death situation. Like right. If somebody's trying to kill me and that's my only option or avenue, then, right. That's a deadly force situation. So yes, chokeholds are prohibited, unless that is the only means for me to stay alive, essentially.
Was that recently that happened, or has that always been? Because
I was never taught chokeholds in the academy. No. So that's never been a thing for us here. And now it is in our policy that we can't use them. within the last several years. But
do you, cause I don't know. I feel like a chokehold under the right circumstances could be like the cleanest way to like calm someone down.
sure. And I think it has its place,
Because putting someone unconscious in a chokehold, if you're trained in how to do it, obviously, is like you're totally eliminating that person from being a problem without really harming them. Yeah. Like when you get choked out, it's not hurting your brain. Like you're literally just like, well, not extensively at least, but you're just going to sleep for a minute, Yeah. And it seems like a really effective way of changing a situation from something really bad to something that's really manageable.
I would say I agree with you to an extent, right? Because taking away somebody's air, even for just a second, could kill them, if not applied properly.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what I meant by
so that, is a very dangerous thing to do. But given the right circumstance, if that is the only means of controlling that situation, I agree with you. I think that, if applied properly, it could have a good effect. I'll give you an example. We had a guy when I was a rookie that was on PCP. Just had no feeling for pain at all. Nothing. We had to deal with him. He was running down the street, not naked, just in his briefs or something. Right. I don't remember the exact, it was a long time ago, but
it's funny that when you said that, I was like, he's probably naked.
Probably. But he was causing havoc. He was attacking people. He's hopped up on PCP, which is just, one of the worst drugs that you can be on. He has a superhuman strength, and he feels no pain. They beanbagged him. They tried every means of less lethal that they could, short of shooting this guy.
Right.
To take him into custody or to stop what he was doing, because that was the alternative, right? We're beanbagging him, and he's not he's laughing at it yeah, like it's nothing, and those are not soft rounds. Those hurt, and most people don't want to be beanbagged more than one time. Right. And, to get hit several times with no clothing on, this guy was just, he's out of his mind. Mm-hmm. And, short of shooting him, an officer that had that training, that had done some mixed martial arts stuff, because we're fortunate enough to be able to have some of that training here, was able to get the guy into a rear naked choke and put him to sleep. And they were able to take him into custody without killing him, and got him, arrested and whatever else that they needed, right. And off the streets. But yeah, I mean, there is a time and a place, I think, where it is appropriate, if given the right circumstances. But I think that those are in very extreme, times of circumstances.
And I think that that's those are the most crucial moments, is when it's that extreme.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that whoever was on that call had the foresight to be like, well, we're not going to shoot this guy. Let me try and just choke him out. Yeah. I don't know how you go from, that's pretty amazing to go from beanbagging someone to being like, all right, I'm going to put my hands on him, instead. But I've heard, and I didn't know this, and you just talked about it, that you guys have access to mixed martial arts training and some of that. I feel like that, personally, I really want to get into mixed martial arts I think it's really great for calming.
Sure.
And being able to be in the moment and listen to what people are saying and not escalate situations because you're worried. Because a lot of escalation comes from the anxiety of what the other person could do to you.
Yeah.
And with some sort of training like mixed martial arts, you'll be more confident in yourself to handle if anything happens, so that you can be more calm in the moment. And so I personally feel like that should be like a requirement for police departments, for their police officers to go through.
Right.
Just to understand like how to do things like a rear naked choke. And like that's part of the funding that I think that the police officers should be more funded personally, so that they have access to things like that without having to go out of their own pocket to pay for it.
Right.
Because I think that that's like essential. Like you want a cop that's confident in his abilities, his or her abilities to apprehend a subject, like by any means, you know? And if that means like putting them in a choke, like they should know how to do that.
Right. Yeah. And we have our defensive tactics, which incorporate some moves, mixed martial arts moves and stuff, ground fighting stuff. But we're fortunate enough here in this town to have places like, Greg Jackson and the Jackson Winklejohn gyms here, where some of the best mixed martial art fighters train at and come out of. Mm-hmm. So we have, and they are very pro police there. They are more than willing to have officers come out and take their classes and learn and make themselves better, not only just for, the calming aspect of it and that stuff, but also to, for that confidence to know, hey, I don't have to resort to a taser or to the tools on my belt. Like I can handle the situation. If I have to go hands on, I can handle myself in a fight, if you will, to get this person into custody. So, and I know a lot of officers take advantage of that and here in our community, at least, and do some of that and take some of those classes and courses. And, so it's, we're fortunate enough to have that,
That's really good to hear. I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
That, we have access to that, because I think that that's like super important.
Sure.
Just for an officer to be confident in his or her abilities.
Right.
I was wondering, is there any like single moment or maybe a moment or two through your service that you feel really changed the way that you look at life and how you interact on a daily basis?
Yes, there is. Depends on how deep you want me to go.
As deep as you want to.
So working in the juvenile section, the crimes against children and child exploitation stuff has definitely changed my outlook on life. Like I said earlier, I had some hardship with some of that stuff and it affected me mentally. And coming out of that now on the other side, I look at life a little bit differently and try not to take things for granted like I used to.
Yeah.
Trying to reprioritize things, I guess, for the better. So making sure that, my kids are taken care of, my family's taken care of, and, above everything else. So
was there is it just an accumulation of working in that sector that brought that to you, or was there like a specific moment where you were like, damn?
Yeah. Because I suffered with some depression and PTSD stuff from that. Mm-hmm. So, coming from an environment where depression, PTSD, being seen as weak, is kind of a stigma you know, being able to ask for help when I need it, setting boundaries. You know, it was a hard thing to do sometimes, especially, you know, with kind of a type A personality, like, oh, I'm strong enough. Like police officers are very good at compartmentalizing things and putting things in boxes and, you know, and shoving them down and not having to deal with them. But at some point, you know, over the course of my career and seeing the things that I've seen, you know, and a lot of horrible trauma to people and kids, you know, it becomes enough. Like my boxes were full. I couldn't pack anything more in them. And, you know, and it got to a point where it was almost too much, you know, to handle. And, you know, and I got really depressed before I really knew how bad it was. So it kind of snuck up on me. And then the other factors of the PTSD stuff that came in were definitely hard to deal with, to go, I can't do that anymore.
Right.
You know? And so now on the other side of it and obviously trying to manage my depression and get better and, you know, not only for myself, but for my family and kids. And, you know, my outlook on life is, you know, trying to look forward and what can I do to be a better father for them and a better husband and a better person. You know, not that I wasn't a good person, but just in general, you know, to live my life and be happy. So absolutely, you know, I think that was probably the biggest thing for me, you know, outside of my shooting, that, you know, probably affected me the most on this department.
Right. I can imagine. Like I said earlier, is like when I heard that that's what you worked in, I was like, that has got to be just like the worst.
Sure.
Like one of the worst jobs to be in.
Yeah.
Especially as a father. Like to have to face these things every day and then go home to your family and be like, all right, go to school, you know? Yeah. I think, I mean, that's a heavy note to end on, and a lot of stuff that you do is heavy. So it's a good note to end on, I guess. But thank you for coming out and talking with me on my podcast. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of really interesting insights into that, and I'm sure there's many more. But thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.